Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling a book that's kind of become like a modern classic in the business world.
Oh yeah, Rework. I know this one. A lot of really good stuff in there.
It is Rework. It's by Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansson.
The guys from Basecamp. Well, it was 37 signals when the book came out, I think.
That's right, 37 signals. And what I love about Rework is that it's packed with these super practical and often unconventional ideas about how to build and run a business.
Yeah, it's not your typical business book, that's for sure. It's not all about writing business plans and all those traditional things they teach in business school.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
like they threw out the rule book and said, hey, here's what actually worked for us. And they really did build an incredibly successful company.
Yeah, and they did it their own way, with a small team working remotely and without all the hype and the traditional marketing stuff. Exactly. And that's what we're going to be digging into today. We're going to be exploring some of those key ideas from Rework that really challenge the conventional wisdom about business.
I'm excited for this one. I think this is going to be really valuable for anyone who's, thinking about starting a business, running a business, or even just looking to shake things up in their career.
So one of the first things that jumped out at me when I read Rework was their take on the whole real world thing.
Right. Like how so many people will tell you, that's a nice idea, but it'll never work in the real world.
Yeah, exactly. And they basically say, ignore that noise. Tune out those voices that are telling you what you can't do.
They're basically saying the real world is often just an excuse for not trying something new,
Yeah.
for not challenging the status quo. Like they're saying who defines what's real anyway.
I love that. It's about defining your own reality, right?
Okay.
And not letting other people's limitations dictate what you can achieve.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the ways they suggest you do that is by embracing constraints.
That's something they talk a lot about, isn't it? Instead of seeing limitations as roadblocks, they see them as opportunities.
Totally. They argue that having fewer resources can actually make you more creative, more resourceful, more efficient. Like when you have limited time, money, or manpower, you have to get really good at prioritizing and making every decision count.
And that leads us to one of their most, I think, mind-blowing claims. Planning is guessing.
Ooh, yeah, that one always gets people talking. They really go after those long, elaborate business plans that so many people obsess over.
I know, right? I mean, I used to think you couldn't start a business without a detailed business plan.
Me too. But they make a really compelling argument that those plans are often just like fantasies.
Yeah.
You're trying to predict the future, but the truth is you have no idea what's going to happen.
Right. So much can change so quickly, especially in today's world. So instead of wasting time on these elaborate plans, they suggest focusing on what you can control right now, like taking action and getting things done.
Yeah, they talk about the importance of building something, launching it, and then iterating based on feedback from real customers.
And that brings us to one of my favorite chapters, Scratch Your Own Itch. It's such a simple but powerful idea.
It is. It's about building things that you actually want to use yourself.
Yeah.
Things that solve problems you've personally experienced.
Exactly. They built Highrise, their contact management software, because they needed a better way to manage their own contacts. It wasn't about some market research-driven decision. It was a solution born out of their own frustration.
And it's amazing how many successful businesses started that way. Think about James Dyson, who invented the bagless vacuum because he was tired of vacuums that lost suction, or Vic Firth, who started making drumsticks because he couldn't find any that met his needs as a professional timpanist.
Yeah, it's like when you're truly passionate about something and you're solving a problem you genuinely care about, it shows in the final product. And you're more likely to see it through those tough times.
Absolutely. And it's more motivating too, right? When you're working on something you believe in, something that you're excited about, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like a mission.
Totally. And speaking of challenging conventions, Rework also takes on this whole mystique around the word entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah. They're not fans of that word.
Yeah.
They think it's become this exclusive club that makes people feel intimidated or unqualified to start a business.
Right, you need some special set of skills or personality traits to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and they're like, no, it's not like that at all. They prefer the term starter because it's more inclusive.
I like that. It's about taking action, starting something, even if it's small. You don't need to have all the answers or $1 million in funding to get started.
Exactly. Just start doing something, anything, and learn as you go. And speaking of things that people get hung up on, Rework also challenges the whole obsession with growth.
Yeah, they actually say growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the kingdom.
They're not afraid to be provocative, that's for sure. But I get their point. Bigger isn't always better. Sometimes staying small and focused can be a much better strategy for long-term success.
Yeah, they actually use the analogy of prestigious universities like Oxford or Harvard. Nobody expects them to constantly expand, right? They're known for their excellence at a certain scale.
It's about finding the right size for your business, the sweet spot where you can maintain quality, profitability, and sanity without the pressure to constantly scale up.
And let's be honest, wouldn't you rather have a thriving business that's manageable than a giant one that's constantly on the verge of imploding?
Absolutely. It's about building a business that works for you, not the other way around.
And speaking of things that can lead to burnout, there's a chapter in Rework that's always timely. Workaholism is stupid.
Ah, yes, a classic Rework truth bomb. They really take aim at that whole culture of glorifying overwork, like wearing your busyness as a badge of honor.
Yeah, it's become this weird status symbol in our society.
But they point out that it's often counterproductive. When you're overworked, you're not at your best. Your decision-making suffers, your creativity dries up, and you end up making more mistakes.
Right, and you burn out, which just leads to more problems down the road. So instead of grinding yourself down, they argue for working smarter, not harder, and judging success by results, not by the number of hours you put in.
And this ties back to their point about embracing constraints. When you have limited time, you have to get really good at prioritizing and focusing on the most important tasks.
And you have to learn to say no to things that aren't essential.
Exactly. Which actually leads us to another gem of a chapter. Throw less at the problem.
I love this one. It's so counterintuitive, but it makes so much sense when you think about it. Our instinct is often to, throw more resources, more people, more time at a problem when it's not working.
Right, like if we just keep pushing harder, eventually it'll work out.
Hmm.
But they argue that that approach often just makes things more complicated and less effective.
They actually use the example of Gordon Ramsay's kitchen nightmares. You know, how he often starts by simplifying those ridiculously complex menus.
It's like he's saying, let's get back to the basics, focus on what we do best, and do it really well.
Right. It's about cutting out the clutter, getting rid of anything that's not adding value, and focusing on what's essential. And that applies to more than just menus, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Think about your own work. How often do you find yourself throwing more time, more energy, more stuff at a problem when the real solution might be to simplify, to streamline, to do less?
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the best solution is the simplest one. And that leads us to another important concept from Rework. Focus on what won't change.
Oh, yeah. This is about building a business around those core principles that remain relevant over time, rather than chasing every fleeting trend.
They talk about how Amazon has consistently focused on things like fast shipping, a wide selection, and low prices elements that have enduring appeal, regardless of what the latest tech gadget is.
And they also highlight Japanese automakers, who have built their reputations on reliability and affordability qualities that have stood the test of time.
It's about identifying those timeless needs and desires and building your business around them, rather than constantly pivoting to chase the next shiny object. Speaking of shiny objects.
They have a lot to say about those, don't they?
They do, and we're going to get into all that, their take on promotion, marketing, competition, culture, all those juicy topics when we come back after the break. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more unconventional wisdom from Rework. So we're back, and we're still diving deep into Rework by Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansson.
And we left off talking about, focusing on what won't change.
Yeah, building your business around those core principles that are always going to be relevant no matter what the trends are.
Right, those timeless needs and desires that people have.
Exactly. So let's talk about promotion.
Oh, yeah. This is where Rework gets really interesting because they have some pretty unconventional advice about getting your business out there.
Okay, I'm all ears. Hit me with it.
Well, one of the first things they say is, welcome obscurity.
Welcome obscurity. Now, that sounds a little counterintuitive, doesn't it? Wouldn't you want everyone to know about your business right away?
Yeah, you'd think so, right? But they actually make a really good case for embracing those early days when you're under the radar.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, they say that obscurity gives you the freedom to, experiment and make mistakes without the pressure of having a ton of people watching your every move.
It's like having a private lab where you can tinker and refine your ideas before you unleash them on the world.
Exactly. And They also talk about how building an audience organically is a much more sustainable approach than, just trying to like blast your message out to everyone.
So it's about like earning attention by providing value, by creating content that people actually want to see.
Exactly. And one of the analogies they use is emulate chefs.
Emulate chefs. Okay, that's a new one.
I know, right? But it makes sense when you think about it. Like, think about those cooking shows where chefs like break down the recipes and share their tips and tricks.
Yeah, I love those shows.
It doesn't make you less likely to, go to their restaurants, does it?
Yeah.
If anything, it makes you more likely to go because you're like, wow, I admire their skill and their generosity.
It builds trust, right? Like you feel like you know them better and you trust their expertise.
Totally. And Rework encourages businesses to do the same thing, to share their knowledge, their processes, their stories,
Yeah.
To be more transparent and open.
So instead of hoarding your knowledge like it's some kind of like secret weapon, you're actually sharing it with the world.
Exactly. And they give some really cool examples of businesses that do this well, like the Hoofler Type Foundry. They have a website called typography.com where they like share all sorts of amazing information about typography.
I've seen that site. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. And another example is Etsy. They have all those workshops and resources to help their sellers, like, build their businesses and market their products effectively.
That's so smart. It's like they're empowering their community, which in turn makes their platform stronger.
Exactly. And that brings us to another one of my favorite Rework principles. And this one, it's pretty bold.
Okay, I'm ready. Lay it on me.
Marketing is not a department.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah, it's such a great way of reframing how we think about marketing. It's not just about ads and promotions.
Right. It's about everything. It's about how you answer the phone, how you design your website, how you package your products. Every interaction a customer has with your business is a form of marketing.
Exactly. So you have to be really intentional and thoughtful about every touch point, making sure that it's all aligned with your brand and your values.
Which brings us to another one of their bold statements. Say no by default.
Yeah, this one goes against a lot of, traditional business advice, which is like, always be closing, say yes to every opportunity.
Yeah, and the customer is always right.
But they're like, no, you need to be really selective about what you take on.
And they have a great example of this with ING Direct. They achieved amazing success by like offering a very limited range of products and services.
And they just said no to anything that didn't fit their model.
It takes guts to do that, though, right? Like to say no to potential customers or opportunities?
It does. But they argue that it's essential for protecting your time, your energy, and ultimately your vision. You can't be everything to everyone.
Right. You have to focus on what you do best and what aligns with your core values.
Exactly. And that actually brings us back to their point about embracing constraints.
Because when you have limitations, you have to get really clear about what's truly important.
Totally. And they talk about how, even when it comes to promotion, having a limited budget can actually force you to be more creative and resourceful.
It's like, necessity is the mother of invention.
Right. So instead of thinking, oh, I don't have enough money to do this, you start thinking, okay, how can I do this differently? How can I make a big impact with limited resources?
And they have some really interesting tactics for doing that. Like one of the things they suggest is going behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah. This is about giving people a glimpse into, how your business works, how you make your products, what your process is like.
It's like pulling back the curtain and letting people see the magic happen.
Exactly. And they use the example of, like, those reality TV shows that have made seemingly mundane professions like commercial fishing or trucking into like captivating things to watch.
Because it's about the people, right? It's about the stories behind the products or the services.
Totally. And they also suggest out-teaching your competition.
Out-teaching your competition. Now, that sounds a little crazy.
I know, right? But they're basically saying, don't hoard your knowledge. Share it with the world. Become a trusted resource in your industry.
It's like that saying, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle.
Exactly. And they argue that this can actually attract more customers and build loyalty because people will see you as like, an expert, a thought leader.
And it kind of disarms the competition too, right? Like you're not afraid to share your knowledge because you're confident in your own abilities.
Yeah. And they actually have a chapter called Don't Copy.
Because when you copy, you're just like replicating the surface level without really understanding the why behind it.
Right. It's about developing your own unique approach, your own vision.
So speaking of standing out, they have some pretty strong opinions about press releases.
Yeah, they basically say press releases are spam.
Ouch.
I mean, let's be honest. How often do you actually read press releases?
Not very
They're
often.
usually just generic, self-promotional stuff that gets lost in the inbox.
So what do they suggest instead?
Well, they encourage businesses to, like, build relationships with journalists and pitch stories that are actually interesting and relevant to their audience.
So it's about being more targeted and personalized in your outreach.
Exactly. It's about quality over quantity.
Which brings us to another great rework principle. Nobody likes plastic flowers.
Ah, yes. It's about being real, not trying to be perfect.
They're basically saying embrace your
Yeah.
imperfections.
People can spot inauthenticity a mile away. So don't try to be something you're not. Just be yourself.
And this applies to like everything, right? Your website, your marketing materials, your social media posts.
Totally. And they even have this kind of provocative chapter called Drug Dealers Get It Right.
Drug dealers. Okay, I have to hear this.
I know, right? It sounds crazy, but their point is that, drug dealers are really good at giving away free samples to hook people.
Because they know that once you try it, you'll be back for more.
Exactly. So Rework encourages businesses to find creative ways to give potential customers a taste of what they offer.
Like a free trial or a sample chapter or, some kind of behind-the-scenes peek into their process.
Right. It's about letting people experience the value of your product or service firsthand.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about external communication, how to get your message out there, how to attract customers. But Rework also has a lot to say about building a strong internal culture.
Oh, yeah. This is a big one for them. And one of the first things they say is, you don't create a culture.
Wait, what? You don't create a culture. So how does it happen?
Well, they believe that culture emerges organically from, consistent behavior. It's not
Yeah.
something you can just, force or manufacture.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. Like, if you want a culture of respect, you have to treat your employees with respect.
Mm-hmm.
If you want a culture of collaboration, you have to create systems and processes that encourage collaboration.
So it's about leading by example and creating an environment that supports the kind of culture you want to have.
Right. And they also highlight the importance of decisions are temporary.
Decisions are temporary.
Yeah, they're basically saying, don't get too hung up on making decisions that feel like permanent or irreversible.
Especially in the business world where things are changing so quickly, you have to be able to adapt and adjust.
Exactly. So instead of agonizing over every decision, just make a decision, move forward, and be willing to change course if you need to.
It's about embracing that agility and flexibility.
Right. And, this actually leads into another one of their more controversial pieces of advice. Skip the rock stars.
Skip the rock star.
I know, it sounds crazy, right? Especially in industries where everyone is obsessed with, hiring the top talent, the superstars.
Right, but I'm sensing a but coming.
But they argue that overvaluing individual stars can actually be detrimental to building a strong team.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Explain that one.
Well, they say that when you have a team full of superstars, egos can clash, competition can get really intense, and collaboration can suffer.
It's like everyone is trying to outshine each other instead of working together towards a common goal.
Exactly. And they advocate for, creating an environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered to contribute their best work.
It's about fostering that sense of teamwork and shared purpose.
Right. And they actually say, treat people like adults.
It sounds so simple, but I bet you a lot of companies don't do that.
I know, right? It's like they think their employees are like children who need to be constantly monitored and controlled.
They're not 13.
Exactly. And Rework talks about how, giving employees more autonomy and trust can actually lead to greater productivity, creativity, and job satisfaction.
Because when you feel respected and trusted, you're more likely to go above and beyond to really take ownership of your work.
Exactly. And this kind of leads into another piece of advice that I think is it's really important, especially in today's culture, which is send people home at 5.
Send people home at 5. Now that's radical.
I know. It goes against everything we're told about. Hustle and grind and working late nights.
Yeah, it's like we're supposed to wear our busyness as a badge of honor.
But they argue that encouraging people to actually have a life outside of work can lead to greater productivity and creativity in the long run.
It's about recognizing that work is a part of life, not the entirety of life.
Exactly. And they also have this great principle that I think is it's really valuable, which is don't scar on the first cut.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, it's basically about not overreacting to, like, isolated incidents. Like, don't create a new rule or policy every time someone makes a mistake.
Oh, I've definitely seen that happen in workplaces. And it creates this, like, bureaucratic nightmare.
Exactly. So they say, policies should be reserved for things that happen repeatedly, not for, like, one-off incidents.
It's about being more thoughtful and measured in your approach.
Right. And, as we've seen throughout our discussion of rework, they really emphasize the importance of authenticity in all aspects of your business.
Like, sound like you.
Exactly. Be genuine, be relatable, build real connections with your employees, your customers, the world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from like promotion to culture to just, yeah, the overall philosophy of rework. But I'm curious to hear more about what they have to say about competition because, that's something that a lot of business owners struggle with.
Oh, yeah. And get ready for another rework mind bender because they have a really different take on competition than, what you might expect.
Okay, I'm ready. Bring it on. So you're saying they think we shouldn't worry about the competition. That's a pretty bold statement,
Yeah.
Especially in today's business world.
It might sound a little crazy, but their point is that, like, spending too much time thinking about your competitors can actually distract you from what really matters. Building something great,
Yeah.
something that people actually want and need, something that solves real problems for your customers.
So instead of constantly looking over your shoulder, worried about what the other guys are doing, they're saying, like, keep your eyes on the prize.
Yeah, exactly. Focus on your own game because the truth is, like, the competitive landscape is always changing,
Yeah.
And if you're constantly trying to keep up with every move your competitors make, you're going to drive yourself crazy.
You'll lose sight of your own vision.
And you'll probably end up making decisions based on fear, instead of, like, what you actually believe in.
So if it's not about beating the competition, then what is it about? What's the ultimate goal, according to Rework?
They say it's about making the competition irrelevant.
Bye.
Creating something so good, so valuable, so indispensable that people just, like, have to have it.
So it's about building something that people absolutely love.
Yeah, something that solves their problems in a way that no one else can.
And I guess that also means building a company that, like, stands for something.
Yeah, a company with a clear purpose, driven by values.
Which actually brings us to one of the most inspiring chapters in the book, which is Make a Dent in the Universe.
Such a great title, right?
It is. It's about creating something that matters, something that makes a difference in the world.
And you know what I love about this concept? You don't need to have, like, a massive team or a ton of resources to do it.
They use the example of Craigslist.
Yeah, Craigslist.
Yeah.
It totally disrupted the entire classified ad industry. And they did it with, like, a tiny team.
And a super simple website.
Exactly. It's a great example of how, like, passion and creativity can often be more powerful than, like, money or resources.
So I think we've covered pretty much everything from Rework, or at least, like, the highlights.
Yeah.
What are your big takeaways from this book?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think for me, the biggest thing is just, like, this feeling of empowerment. Rework shows us that business doesn't have to be this, like, soul-crushing bureaucratic grind.
Yeah, that's what I loved about it, too.
It can be something fulfilling,
Yeah.
something meaningful, something even fun.
Right. It's about stripping away all that unnecessary complexity and, like, getting back to the basics.
Exactly. Building great products, serving your customers, creating a work environment that, makes people happy and productive.
And it's about, like, trusting your gut, trusting your instincts, and not being afraid to break the rules.
Yeah, not being afraid to do things differently.
So if you're feeling like, stuck in a rut or just looking for some inspiration to shake things up, I highly recommend checking out Rework.
It might just change the way you think about business forever.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Rework. We hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into, some more mind-blowing ideas. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep reworking the world around you.